If you'd told me a year ago I'd be standing in a rain-soaked alley at 2 a.m. with my 6-year-old half asleep on my hip, staring down a man twice my size because a stranger in a designer suit was whispering, "Please, don't hurt me. I can't get up," I would have laughed right in your face, because my life wasn't built for drama. It was built for lunch boxes, rent payments, and fixing whatever appliance decided to die that week. But that night didn't care who I was. It didn't care that I was exhausted, broke, and one late fee away from drowning. It just dropped this moment in my lap like a test I didn't ask for. And I swear, I felt something old and stubborn wake up inside me. The part of me that used to run into burning buildings before life taught me to keep my head down. I'm Eli Carter. I'm a single dad, and my whole world is my daughter, June, a little tornado with curly hair and a stuffed rabbit she treats like royalty. We were cutting through an alley in the South Loop because June had made me promise her a late-night pretzel from the corner stand, and I was the kind of dad who clung to tiny promises like they were oxygen. The rain was coming down hard, streetlights flickering like they were tired too, puddles shining black on the pavement, and then we heard it. Not a scream, not a siren, just a voice that sounded small and terrified, like someone trying not to be noticed. "Please, don't hurt me. I can't walk." June's little hand tightened around my coat. Her eyes went wide, and she whispered, "Daddy, is someone in trouble?" And I wish I could tell you I hesitated like a responsible parent. I wish I could tell you I thought it through. But the truth is my body moved before my brain could catch up, because I used to be a firefighter, and even though I wasn't wearing the uniform anymore, that instinct never really leaves you. It just sleeps until the wrong sound wakes it up. Headlights from a passing car cut through the alley for half a second, and I saw her, curled on the ground near a dumpster, white blazer soaked through, hair plastered to her face, ankles swollen like a grapefruit, a laptop bag clutched to her chest like it was the last life raft on Earth, and looming over her was a guy with his hood up, stepping closer like he owned the dark. I shifted June higher on my hip, stepped forward into the light, and my voice came out steady even though my heart was hammering. "Hey, back up. Now." The guy turned, sized me up, then glanced at June like she was an inconvenience, and he sneered, "Not your business." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten him. I just let the silence sit for a beat, then said, "It is now. Take one more step, and you're going to have a real bad night." Something about the way I said it made him pause. Not because I'm tough, not because I'm a hero, but because I wasn't performing. I wasn't trying to win. I was just done letting fear run the room. He looked past me, like he was checking for witnesses, then muttered something and melted back into the rain like a roach when the lights come on. I knelt beside her, careful, slow, because people who are scared don't need sudden moves, and I said, "You're safe. Can you move your toes?" She blinked up at me like she couldn't process the idea of safety, and her lips trembled. "Please, don't call anyone. They'll find me." I didn't know who they were, but I knew fear when I heard it, the kind that isn't about a random mugger. It's about being hunted. June leaned down, clutching her stuffed rabbit, and in the smallest voice she asked the woman, "Does it hurt?" The woman tried to smile and failed, and June did the sweetest, bravest thing I've ever seen. She slipped her little pink scarf off her neck and laid it across the woman's shaking hands like a blanket, like she'd decided, without anyone telling her, that comfort is something you can offer even when you're small. I didn't have a plan, I just had a choice, and I heard my late wife's voice in the back of my head, the way she'd said it in the hospital when she knew she wasn't coming home. "Promise me you'll still be kind, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." So I took off my coat, draped it over the woman's shoulders, and said, "No hospital then. But you can't stay here. My place is close, it's warm, and we'll figure it out." She stared at me like she was trying to find the trap. "Why would you help me?" And I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was sad that she had to ask. "Because you're hurt," I said, simple as that. And I lifted her carefully, one arm under her knees, one behind her back, like I was carrying a person and not a headline. She was lighter than she should have been, like she'd been living on stress and coffee, and as we moved, the laptop bag bumped my chest, and I realized she wasn't holding it for work. She was holding it like evidence. 3 flights up, my building smelled like old wood and someone's fried onions. The stairwell light buzzed, And my apartment was exactly what you'd expect from a single dad who's doing his best: small, clean, a little cluttered, refrigerator covered in crayon art, a sofa with a patched armrest, a cheap lamp that gave off warm yellow light instead of that harsh blue LED stuff. I set her down gently, and she looked around like she'd stepped into another universe, not because it was fancy, but because it was real. June hovered by the doorway, watching her like a little guard dog, and then she said something that hit like a punch. "You look like you're trying not to cry." "I do that when I miss my mom." The woman froze, like nobody had ever spoken to her without a title attached, and when she finally whispered, "I'm Sloan," it came out like she was forgetting how to be a person. Sloan. I didn't recognize the name, and later I'd find out why. That's hilarious. But in that moment, she was just a soaked stranger with a swollen ankle and fear in her eyes. I cleaned up her ankle, wrapped it the way I used to on calls, checked her toes, told her it was probably a bad sprain, and she watched my hands like she couldn't believe rough, scarred hands could be gentle. June offered her the stuffed rabbit like it was a sacred object. "He helps when you're scared. You can borrow him." Sloan hugged that rabbit to her chest, and something in her cracked open. She started crying, the kind of crying adults do when they've been holding it in for too long. And I didn't say a word, because sometimes the best thing you can do for a person is not make them explain their pain. When the sobs finally calmed, she wiped her face and said, almost like a confession, "They're looking for me. My fiancé. My board. I found something I wasn't supposed to find." There it was, the reason she'd been out in the rain with a laptop bag like a shield. I asked, "Are you in danger?" She stared at the floor and nodded once. That night, after June fell asleep on my bed and I gave Sloan dry sweatpants and an old hoodie, I found her sitting on the couch holding a note I'd left her after she'd limped toward the door, the note that just said, "Stay. Your ankle's not ready. It's okay." She held it like nobody had ever offered her help without charging interest. In the morning, I left for work. I fix commercial laundry machines for a living now, because life took a hard left after the fire department and after my wife, and I work whatever hours I can, and I expected Sloan to be gone when I came back, because people like her don't stay in places like mine. But she was still there, sitting at the little table with June, trying to draw a flower with a crayon like it was a foreign language, and June was coaching her like a tiny art teacher. "Not too hard. You'll break it. Crayons are like feelings." I actually laughed at that, and Sloan looked up, startled, like she hadn't heard a real laugh in a long time. Over the next few days, Sloan tried to help around the apartment like she didn't know what to do with herself when she wasn't being important. She tried making eggs and burned them so badly the smoke alarm screamed. And June clapped like it was a magic show. "You made the alarms sing." Sloan covered her face, embarrassed, and I said, "It's fine. The alarm's dramatic. He does this for toast too." And for the first time she smiled. A real one, small but honest. That's the thing about power. It looks shiny from the outside, but if it's built on fear, it's just another cage. And the more Sloan talked, the more I realized she'd been living her whole life on someone else's leash. Her fiancé, a guy named Pierce Lang, was the polished kind of charming that feels rehearsed, and her mentor, the man who helped build her company, was pushing her to sign documents she didn't agree with, to keep quiet for the sake of stability. And when she didn't, she became a problem to be handled. Then, on day 10, June was napping and Sloan was finally moving without wincing when her phone buzzed with an unknown number and her face drained of color. "We know where you are." She dropped the phone like it burned, and for a second I saw her not as a CEO or a headline, but as someone who'd been cornered for a long time. That afternoon a knock came at my door and Sloan went stiff, but the voice outside was soft and urgent. "Sloan. It's Tessa. Please, I'm alone." Tessa was her former assistant, eyes red, rain on her coat, the kind of person who looks like she's been crying in elevators, and she handed Sloan a thick envelope. "Pierce is spinning it. He's telling everyone you stole files, that you're unstable. They fired me for trying to warn you, but I copied everything I could." Inside were printed emails, wire transfers, contracts that didn't add up, enough to wreck a man who thought money made him untouchable. Sloan's hands shook as she flipped through them, and she whispered, "He was going to take everything." And I almost let him, because I thought it was love. I didn't say, "I told you so." I didn't say, "How could you not see it?" because people love to blame the victim when the villain wears a suit. I just said, okay. Then we fight. That's the turning point right there. Not the alley, not the rescue. The moment a person stops begging to be spared and starts deciding to stand. We made a plan at my kitchen table while June slept, the envelopes spread out like a map, and I called an old friend from my firefighter days, a lawyer named Danny Rios who owes me one because I dragged him out of a wreck years ago. And Danny didn't even ask questions. He just said, "Get her somewhere safe. I'm on it." We left the city before dawn in my beat-up truck, June in the back seat hugging her rabbit, Sloan in the passenger seat clutching that laptop like it contained her spine, and we drove north to my mom's place in rural Wisconsin because out there, the roads don't have cameras on every corner and the sky is big enough to breathe. My mom didn't ask for details. She just pulled Sloan into a hug and said, "You look tired, honey. Come eat." And I watched Sloan blink fast like she was trying not to fall apart over the fact that kindness can be that simple. Days turned into weeks, and Sloan learned to weed a garden, learned to cook without burning the world down, learned that a home can be tiny and still feel safe. And the wildest part was watching June, my little girl who'd lost her mom too young, treat Sloan like she belonged, like she'd been waiting for a missing puzzle piece. But peace doesn't last when powerful people are embarrassed, and Danny called with a voice that sounded like warning bells. "Pierce is going public. He's claiming you're mentally unstable. He's preparing to file an emergency petition to protect the company from you." Sloan sat very still, then said something that made my chest ache. "He's going to make me sound crazy, so nobody believes me," Danny said. "Then we beat him to the story. You need to speak, not just through documents, through your voice." They arranged a meeting with an investigative reporter, and when Sloan slid the evidence across the table, the reporter's eyes widened. This is massive. 48 hours later, the story dropped, and the internet did what it does. It lit up, it picked sides, it turned human pain into debates. Pierce's face was everywhere, his company's statements were everywhere, and Sloan's name was trending like she was a product. Then came the press conference, and I stood in the back of the room while Sloan walked up to the podium in a plain navy suit. No luxury brand armor, just her, and she said into a wall of cameras, "My name is Sloan Avery." I was threatened, I was silenced, and I was told I was unstable for refusing to sign lies. I am not here to reclaim a title. I am here to reclaim myself. You could feel the room shift, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Reporters fired questions like bullets. Are you doing this for revenge? Are you being influenced? Do you admit you stole files? And Sloan looked straight into the cameras and said, "If telling the truth makes me a problem, then maybe the system needs more problems." That line hit like thunder. Within hours, Pierce was suspended, regulators got involved, board members started resigning like rats off a sinking ship, and the first time I saw Sloan exhale without shaking, I realized she'd been holding her breath for years. Later that evening, she got a call from her mentor, the man who'd smiled at gala dinners and called her brilliant in public while backing Pierce in private, and he asked to meet her to apologize. She went anyway, because closure is a temptation even when it's a trap, and I waited nearby like a shadow. He showed up looking smaller than his reputation, and he said, "I was afraid. I thought if I protected the company, I was protecting you." Sloan's voice was calm, almost cold. "You protected yourself." He asked for forgiveness, and she didn't give him a clean ending. She said, "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, but I'm done carrying you." Then, just when I thought the night was over, Pierce himself appeared across the park, hands in his pockets, face drawn, and he didn't walk up close because he's brave only when he's surrounded by attorneys. He just said, "You didn't have to destroy me." Sloan didn't raise her voice. She said, "You destroyed you. I just stopped pretending." Pierce looked past her at me, like I was a stain on his worldview, and he said something that still makes me laugh bitterly. "You're really choosing this?" And that's where the ending gets complicated, because what does this mean, right? A single dad with grease under his nails, a small town, a kid who laughs at burnt eggs, a life without marble floors. Sloan didn't answer him with romance. She answered him with freedom. "I'm choosing myself." Pierce walked away, but not before tossing one last line over his shoulder. "You'll regret turning your life into a spectacle." And maybe that's the question that never fully goes away. Because yes, Pierce needed to be stopped, but also yes, the world loves to watch a woman fall and then judge how she stands back up. Sloane didn't go back to her penthouse. She didn't chase her old title. She started something new, a foundation to help other women who were being boxed in by powerful men and polished lies. And my mom's kitchen table became her first office for a while, papers spread out next to June's crayons. Life didn't turn into a fairy tale. It turned into a fight with paperwork and court dates and people online who will never know you but will swear they do. And that's where I want to leave it, because the ending isn't a bow, it's a debate. Was I right to pull Sloane into my life when my daughter was involved? Was Sloane right to go public and risk turning her trauma into a media circus? Was it justice? Or was it messy revenge dressed up as truth? And here's the spiciest part. Do you think someone like Sloane can ever really start over? Or does society punish women forever the moment they stop being convenient? Drop your honest take in the comments. No sugarcoating. Tell me what you would have done in that alley, what you would have done at that kitchen table, and whether you think protecting someone is worth it when the fallout could burn your whole life down. Because I promise you, the loudest opinions usually come from people who've never had to choose between staying safe and doing what's right.